This time, I will tell you a story about King Arthur, the sword, and the kingdom. For that, let's take a few moments to detach from the hustle and bustle of the outside world and turn inward. Find the most comfortable position for you right now. You can sit in a chair with your back straight but still relaxed, or lie down comfortably. Make sure your body is well supported. Chapter 1, The Prophecy of Merlin. In the darkest of times, a king shall rise not from power, but from purpose. The book of Merlin. Winter winds howled across the moors, and the torches of Tentacle Castle flickered in the storm. Igraine, the Duchess of Cornwall, lay in her chamber, unaware that destiny stirred beyond her walls. That night, her child, Arthur, was conceived not by her husband, but by Uther Pendragon, king of all Britons. Through the magic of Merlin the sorcerer, the wizard had cast a spell to disguise Uther as Igraine's husband, fulfilling a terrible pact. In exchange, Merlin demanded a promise. The child must be mine to raise, he said, for his fate belongs not to kings, but to Britain itself. And so it was. The child, Arthur, was born in secret. He was taken from his mother's arms before her tears could dry, and delivered to a humble knight, Sir Ector, who raised him as his own son, far from the courts of lords and the whispering halls of power. The boy grew up not in a castle, but in the woods and fields, chasing deer and dreaming of dragons. He knew nothing of his lineage, only that he was different. His brother Kay mocked his silence, but Ector watched the boy with wary respect. There was something in Arthur's eyes, wisdom, an ache of fire. One morning, when Arthur was 12, he heard a voice in his dreams. When the sword sings, the world will know you, it said. And when the crown weighs upon your head, the war will begin. That was the first time Arthur dreamed of the sword and the stone. Chapter 2, The Sword and the Stone. The city of Londonium was restless with whispers. Kings from across the realm had gathered in the broken capital, summoned by a prophecy that stirred hope and fear. The High King Uther was dead, and no heir had claimed the throne. Warlords prowled the countryside. The land bled. But in the square before the ruined cathedral, something impossible had appeared overnight. A sword, buried to the hilt in a block of stone, not hammered or wedged, but sunken, as if the rock itself had melted around it. No chisel marks, no cracks, only an inscription on the blade, glimmering faintly in the winter sun. Whoso pulleth out this sword from this stone, an anvil is right-wise king born of all England. The crowds gathered in silence. Then the laughter began, first from the nobles, then the knights. A trick, they said, a show. Every man worth his blood would try the sword, and everyone would fail. Still they came, dozens, hundreds. None could move it. Not by strength, and not by charm, not by prayer. Meanwhile, far from the city, Arthur rode beside Sir Ector and Kay through frost-covered woods, their horses' breath steaming in the cold morning air. They were bound for the tournament in Londonium, where Kay hoped to earn his knighthood. Arthur carried his brother's gear without complaint. Though barely 15, his frame was strong from years of training and toil. He had never held a sword in battle, but he knew how to sharpen one. He knew how to observe. Kay was boastful that morning, bragging about the victories he'd soon claim. But when they reached the city gates, Kay discovered he had forgotten his sword. Arthur, he barked, run back to the inn and fetch it quickly before the match begins. Arthur obeyed. A sword in the light. The innkeeper shook his head when Arthur arrived. You left no sword here, lad. Panic swelled in Arthur's chest. Kay would be furious. He turned down an alley, desperate, eyes darting. Then he saw it, the churchyard, the sword. It shimmered beneath a beam of golden sunlight that pierced the clouds. No one stood near. The square had emptied for the jousting field. Arthur approached. He placed his hand on the hilt. It was cool to the touch, like water from a sacred spring. Without a thought, he pulled. There was no resistance. The sword slid free with a song only Arthur could hear. A sound like wind over mountains, like thunder in reverse. His hands trembled. He didn't know what it meant. He only knew that Kay needed a sword. Truth revealed that Kay accepted the weapon without noticing. Only later, when Ector asked where he'd found it, did the truth emerge. Ector demanded Arthur return the blade to the stone. Then, before a growing crowd, he told the boy, draw it again. Arthur did. Gasps echoed across the square. Several knights pushed forward, demanding to try. The sword would not move for them. Only Arthur died by sundown. The whispers had turned to chants. The king, they cried, but Arthur stood apart, uncertain and afraid. In the shadow shadows of the cathedral. Merlin watched with quiet eyes. The moment had come. The wheel had turned. The future had begun. Chapter 3, Crowned in Chaos. The great hall of Londonium's crumbling cathedral had not seen a coronation in nearly 2 generations. Ivy crawled across the stone walls. Broken stained glass cast fractured light on the worn flagstones, yet on this day the air thrummed with tension. Arthur Pendragon, still a boy in the eyes of many, stood at the altar beside the sword he had drawn twice. Around him, nobles muttered behind curled lips. Some scoffed, others glared with silent fury. Only a few knelt. Sir Ophius, grizzled and scarred from decades of war, bowed first. Then came Sir Bedivere, then Sir Brastius, both loyal to Uther. They recognized something the others would not admit. The boy had not just pulled a sword. He had shifted the world. The seeds of division ebbed as Merlin prepared the sacred oil. Lord Lot of Orkney stood and spoke. "This is a trick," he growled, pointing a jeweled finger at Arthur. "A stable boy raised in a peasant's home shall we give the crown to a child found in the woods." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. "Let the lords decide by vote," shouted another, "Lord Urien of Gore, or better yet by battle." Merlin stepped forward then, his voice calm and low but filled with thunder. "The sword was placed by the hands of prophecy. If you defy it, you defy fate." But the damage had been done, though Arthur was crowned that day king of the Britons. By right of steel and spell only half the nobles swore fealty. The rest departed in silence, carrying rebellion in their hearts, returned to the first days later. Arthur rode with Sir Ector back to the woods of his childhood. It was a silent journey. The weight of the crown pressed heavier than any helm as they passed the creek where he'd once fished for trout. Arthur reined in his horse. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, eyes not meeting Ector's. "I promised," the knight said quietly. "To Merlin, to your father, Uther." Arthur turned to him. "So I'm not your son." Ector looked away, pain in his eyes. "You've always been my son, Arthur. But now you're everyone's." Arthur nodded, but it brought him no comfort. Merlin's warning that night, as Arthur sat alone beneath the stars, Merlin appeared. Beside him in a shimmer of smoke and shadow. "You have questions," the wizard said. "I don't know how to be a king." "No one does," Merlin replied, "until they are one. The sword chose you, yes. But now comes the choosing of who you will become." Arthur stared at the fire. "They hate me," he said. "They fear you," Merlin corrected, "because you were not born into their world. You were born to change it. Will I succeed?" Merlin didn't answer. Instead, he handed Arthur something wrapped in silk, a dagger with runes carved in its hilt. "Keep it close," he said. "There are shadows in your blood, and enemies closer than you think." The gathering storm in the north, Lord Lot gathered his banners. In the east, Urien raised a host. Across the isle, whispers grew of civil war, the young king versus the old order. But in a grove lit by moonlight, Arthur made a vow to himself. "I will build a kingdom where the strong protect the weak, where honor lives, not just in battle, but in law and love and truth, even if I die for it." And as the wind stirred the trees, it carried a whisper that only Merlin heard. So it begins. Chapter 4, The Birth of Excalibur. A kingdom in Chrysis, the winter passed bitterly. Skirmishes erupted across the land. The banner of Arthur flew in the south and west, but the north burned with rebellion. Word reached Camelot that Lot of Orkney and his allies had assembled 30 kings against Arthur's claims still. Arthur refused to answer war with war yet. He knew he needed more than swords. He needed loyalty. He needed a symbol dot in Merlin, ever the shadow behind the throne had. A whisper ready for the young king. "There is a weapon not forged by man, but by fate," he said one night in the royal solar. "The sword you pulled was a sign, but it is not the one that will save you." Arthur leaned forward. "Then where is it?" Merlin's eyes gleamed. "In the waters of the wild, where time forgets. We ride at dawn, journey to the Lethe, rode beyond the bounds of roads and kingdoms, beyond the crags of Wales and into lands where the trees grew thick and ancient. Fog clung to the hills, birds fell silent. Merlin said little. When Arthur asked what lay ahead, the wizard only murmured, "You do not find the Lady of the Lake. She allows you to ride." On the 7th day, they reached a still pool at the edge of a glade. The water was black as onyx, and the air shimmered with enchantment. Then the lake stirred. From its center rose a shape cloaked in mist, a woman robed in silver and moonlight. Her feet gliding across the water her face was ageless, her hair flowed like ink, and in her hands she held a sword that shone like starlight itself. "Arthur Penrug on," she said. Her voice echoed as if from within his bones. "King not by blood, but by spirit. Do you know what this is?" Arthur stepped forward slowly. "Excalibur," he whispered. The test of the sword did not hand him the blade. Instead, she asked, "What would you give for your kingdom?" "My life," Arthur answered without hesitation. "Would you give your pride?" "Yes." "Would you give your heart?" Arthur hesitated. "Even your heart?" She asked again. He thought of Guinevere, whom he had met only once at the spring court. The way she looked through him, not at him. He nodded, double quotes. "Yes," he said, "even that." Only then did she extend the sword. Arthur reached for it, and the moment his fingers touched the hilt, a blaze of light surged from the lake, a circle of golden fire spiraling skyward. The trees bowed, the mist parted, and the sword pulsed with living power. The lady smiled, fading into the rippling water. Her final words echoed across the surface. "The sword is yours, but beware. The scabbard is the greatest gift." Arthur looked down. Black leather sheath, unmarked by symbols, lay at the edge of the water. Merlin retrieved it solemnly. "So long as you wear the scabbard," he said, "you shall not bleed. But lose it, and you will bleed more than any man alive. Return." Of the king, when Arthur returned to Camelot, Excalibur at his side, something shifted. Even those who doubted him stepped back. The blade was not of this world. It gleamed like frozen lightning. It sang when unsheathed. In its presence, men felt their courage or their cowardice surged to the surface. Arthur no longer looked like a boy, and soon letters began to arrive, not of war, but of barley. The sword had done what politics could not, but peace was still a whisper. And far to the north, in a darkened hall, Morgana of the Old Blood watched through scrying glass. "He has the sword," she whispered to herself. "Then I will take the scabbard." Chapter 5, Knights of the Round Table. The making of Camelot was not yet stone, and Spirate was a rough fort, built atop the bones of Roman ruins. But under Arthur's hand, it began to change. The walls were rebuilt, the gates were opened to the people, grain flowed to the starving. Thieves were judged, not hanged, and still, the kingdom waited. They had seen kings come and go. Arthur would not win the land with a sword alone. He would need loyalty not bought, but earned not so. He summoned men and women from across the realm, not lords, not bloodline princes, those who had proven valor, honor, and heart. The first knights first to kneel was Sir Bedivere, grizzled and loyal, who had stood beside Uther to the end. Then came Sir Gawain, a red-haired giant from Orkney, whose rage was matched only by his sense of justice. Sir Kay, Arthur's foster brother, was granted a seat out of duty and love, though his pride still simmered. Next came Pellinor, hunter of the questing beast, who rode with madness in his eyes and wisdom in his words. But it was Lancelot du Lac who silenced the court. He rode into Camelot one rain-slick morning on a white horse, soaked to the bone, carrying the body of a child slain by bandits. Without ceremony, he laid the boy at Arthur's feet. "I have no title," he said, "but I fight for the innocent." Arthur stood. "Then you need no title." A table without sides. Merlin came to Arthur that evening with a carpenter, an old man with hands like bark. "You do not need a throne," the wizard said. "You need a circle." And so the round table was crafted. No head, no foot, no higher place than another. A symbol of what Camelot would be, a realm where all voices mattered and no one sat above justice. Inscribed around its edge were the words, "In serving each other, we serve the realm. In serving the realm, we serve the light." Each knight took in oath not to the crown, but to the people, to protect the weak, to uphold honor, to show mercy, to speak truth even when it burns. That Queen of pierced court soon filled with music and debate, tales of valor, and the scent of spring blossoms. But when Guinevere of Cameliard arrived, the wind shifted. She came as a diplomat, daughter of a minor king, bold in spirit and sharp. In speech, Arthur saw in her the strength of a nation. The people saw a queen. But Lancelot saw something else. When their eyes met, the world seemed to hush. And in that silence, the seeds of love and ruin were planted. The hidden thread for two. The north, Morgana stirred. The scabbard was no longer in the lake. It had passed to Merlin's keeping, and Merlin, though wise, could not see all. One night, in a dream of fire and ash, he awoke gasping. "There is a traitor among them," he whispered to the night, "and he is Arthur's blood." But the dawn came too quickly, and the king's fate moved one step closer to the edge. Chapter 6, The Lady of the Lake, echoes beneath the water tracing symbols in the dirt, muttering to the stars. Arthur asked him once what he was doing. Watching, Merlin said, for what always comes. What's that? Merlin's eyes were distant. The fall. But one night, beneath a blood-red moon, Merlin vanished. Into the mist Arthur awoke to find the wizard's chambers empty, his staff gone, and a single word scrawled into the ash of the hearth, Naimu. No one knew what it meant except one, Vivienne. An old priestess from Avalon came to Arthur with a story long buried before you were born. She said there were 3 sisters of the water, Naimu, Vivienne, and Morgana, each sworn to a different path, one to wisdom, one to balance, and one to vengeance. Arthur felt the air shift. Morgana is off the lake, she was, said Vivienne. Until the lake casts her out, Merlin and the lady far beyond the realm of men, Merlin stood once more on the banks of the enchanted lake. The water stirred, and from it rose Naimu, the true lady of the lake, ageless and serene. You gave him the sword, Merlin said, without anger. I did, she replied, and the scabbard. Her eyes darkened. It is no longer safe with you. Merlin stepped forward. Morgana seeks it. She already does more than seek. She moves through dreams, through the minds of those weak or angry. The war to come will not be fought by steel alone. Merlin's face tightened. Will you fight with us? I cannot, she said. I am not of your world anymore, but I can give you the truth. What truth? She looked at him, soft and cold. Arthur's fate is sealed. You can delay it, but you cannot stop it. Morgana's shadow in a chamber lined with serpent carvings. Morgana knelt before a pool of smoke and whispered incantations in the old tongue. From the mist, a voice answered her, twisted, deep, male. He grows stronger, she hissed. Then wound him where he is weakest. The voice said, not his sword, his soul. Morgana's eyes flared. I will take the queen. The disappearing scabbard Merlin returned to Camelot pale and worn. In his hand was the scabbard of Excalibur, still untouched by time. He warned Arthur, this is more precious than the sword itself. Guard it, lock it, trust no one. Arthur obeyed. The scabbard was sealed beneath the altar of the chapel, guarded day and night. But 3 weeks later, it was gone. No doors broken, no guards slain, only a whisper left behind. Scratched in silver across the stone, the scabbard shall find its rightful bearer. Forshita Winkham told rejoiced that spring. The fields bloomed, the poor were fed, and knights returned victorious from quests in every corner of the land. But beneath the joy, something unseen was breaking. Whispers between lovers, secrets among knights, dreams filled with fire and deep. Beneath the lake, the swords twin the scabbard was now in motion, guided by a will older than kings, older than stone. And in the east, Mordred rode westward under false banners, his face hidden, his smile cold. Chapter 7, The Trials of Lancelot. Champion of the realm, Sir Lancelot du Lac was more than a knight. He had become a simple god, tall, silent, and fierce in battle. He defended the helpless, slew beasts that had plagued villages for decades, and brought down traitors with blade and justice wherever he rode. Peasants bowed and children ran after his horse. They called him the Silver Lion. Arthur trusted him beyond all others died. When enemies rose in the north, Lancelot was sent. When an ambassador vanished on the coast, Lancelot returned with the truth. When bandits threatened a village, he was there before the crown could even issue orders. He was the kingdom's sword, but even the sharpest blade can cut the hand that wields it. Guinevere's garden Camelot bloomed in early summer, and Queen Guinevere often walked the royal gardens at dusk, alone, distant. She did her duties. She spoke with wisdom and grace, but those closest to her knew the signs of a heart behind glass. And it was during one of these twilight walks that Lancelot found her beneath the white blooming hawthorn. You should not walk without guards, he said. She turned, her voice soft. And yet, here you are. That night began something that neither had planned. Not yet love, not yet betrayal. A possibility, the ordeal of fire soon after. A nobleman's daughter, Elaine of Astolat, accused a knight of violating her lands and threatening her handmaidens. The accused was Sir Meliagon, cousin to Lord Lodan, a round table knight. He denied the charges and challenged any accuser to trial by fire or combat to the death. Arthur turned to Lancelot. You will represent the Queen's justice, he said. The duel took place beneath the watchful stone gaze of the court. Meliagon was ruthless, strong, brutal, but Lancelot moved like a shadow. Every blow deflected, every feint read like a book died in moments. Meliagon lay bloodied on the sand. Defeated but alive, do you ask for mercy? Lancelot asked, sword to his throat, Melia gun spat. Lancelot sheathed his blade, then you shall have it anyway. The people cheered, but Arthur saw the look Guinevere gave Lancelot from the balcony, and Merlin saw it too. Merlin's warning that evening in the flickering torchlight of the hall. Merlin approached Lancelot. You think you are strong, he said. I know I am, Lancelot replied, then resist the one thing stronger than you. Lancelot didn't answer. You can defeat monsters, the wizard continued. But love will destroy you if you let it take root where it should not grow. Lancelot looked to the queen's chambers. I have given my life to this crown, he said quietly. Is it so wrong to want something for myself? Yes, Merlin said. If that something is the king's, a poisoned letter a week later. The letter appeared on Arthur's throne. No seal, no mark, just 3 lines in fine, sharp ink. The knight you trust above all hides the one thing you never see. Look not at his sword, but at his silence. Love is a sharper blade. Arthur crumpled the letter without a word, but he did not burn it. He placed it inside his armor and said nothing. Chapter 8, The Love of Guinevere. A queen-in-waiting, Queen Guinevere had long been praised for her composure. She spoke with authority in court, offered wisdom to the young knights, and smiled at Arthur in public. But in the quiet hours, when the tapestries cast long shadows on her chamber walls, she no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. She had married a king, but not the man. Arthur was noble, brave, just odd but distant. His soul belonged to Britain, to the sword, to Merlin's riddles, never fully to her. And into that space came Lancelot, not with flowers, not with words, just presence, protection, understanding. They met more often in the gardens than in the old chapel, than in silence, where hearts speak more clearly than tongues. What began as glances had become something more, something dangerous. The queen's guardian, Sir Agravain, nephew to Arthur and blood kin to Morgana, noticed a change in Guinevere's routine. He did not speak of it, not to the queen, not to Lancelot. He took it to Mordred. Now a grown man, Mordred had risen swiftly through the ranks, a knight of charm, wit, and smiling ambition. His parentage remained a mystery to most, but Merlin knew that, so did Morgana, and Mordred's ambitions ran deeper than any title. He did not want to serve the king. He wanted to replace him. The fire in the Gati was at midsummer during Camelot's great feast that the trap was laid, as music filled the hall and firelight danced in goblets of wine. Agravain and Mordred slipped from the feast and crept to the royal chapel. There, behind the great stone doors, Guinevere and Lancelot stood, not yet in each other's arms, but no longer apart. The door burst open, swords drawn, gasps, accusation. Guinevere, frozen. Lancelot acted. He drew steel in a blink and struck down 2 of the king's guards before sweeping Guinevere behind. Him, run, he told her. She did in single quotes T-dot instead. She stood firm. I will not be remembered for shadows. If I fall, let it be in light. The court will not dawn. Arthur stood at the center of the throne room, his crown cast aside, his eyes red with sleepless grief. Guinevere stood accused of treason and adultery. Lancelot had fled. Several knights lay dead. The court was divided. Many called for execution. Others begged for mercy. The Round Table had never been more fractured. Arthur said nothing for a long time. Then he spoke. I loved to people more than my life. One betrayed me by action, one by silence. I do not know which wound cuts deeper. Guinevere was sentenced to be burned at the stake, but Arthur did not attend the execution. He sat alone in the chapel, Excalibur across his knees, unable to pray that rescue, and whereas the pyre was lit, the crowd silent, a cry echoed from the forest edge. Hoofs thundered, steel flashed. Lancelot returned. He cut through the guards like a storm wind, lifted Guinevere from the flames, and vanished into the trees. A night turned outlaw that night. Arthur stood at the balcony of Camelot, watching smoke from the ruined execution grounds rise like a serpent. The kingdom had been split. Camelot was no longer whole. Chapter 9, Betrayal at Camelot. The broken to bleed Round Table, once whole and shining with ideals, now sat fractured by silence. Lancelot and Guinevere were gone, vanished into the forest beyond Camelot. Some knights called him a traitor. Others whispered he had only done what the king could not. Fewer still dared speak Guinevere's name. As if it carried a curse, Arthur had not spoken of her since he summoned the table one last time. 34 nights sat in grim silence, sir. Gawain stood, grief still wrought his brother Gareth had died during Lancelot's escape. I will have justice, Gawain said, or blood. Arthur did not meet his eyes, you shall have both, but in his heart. He heard Merlin's words again, you can delay fate, but you cannot stop it. Mordred's game behind the shadows of the fractured court, Mordred made his move. He whispered in ears, offered promises of peace, and spoke to the younger knights of a kingdom where old kings no longer ruled. He called Arthur's reign a crumbling myth. He offered strength, vision, some followed him. Some died refusing, and then Mordred made his boldest stroke. He sent a messenger to Arthur under a banner of peace. Let Lancelot return, let Guinevere come home. In this bloodshed, divide the kingdom if you must, but let there be peace. The letter was signed, your son, Mordred Pendragon. The hidden truth, Arthur stared at the parchment in stunned silence. His son. He turned to Merlin. The wizard hesitated, then spoke. Yes, Arthur's voice was a whisper. By whom? Merlin's eyes clouded with old sorrow. Morgana, conceived through trickery, raised in hate. Forged not from love, but from revenge. Arthur, real. He carried your name, Merlin said, but not your soul. Fire in the hall that night. How the king's thoughts burned, Mordred struck, disguised as a royal guard. His men entered the inner keep. Blades flashed, torches fell. Screams rang out through the corridors of Camelot. Sir Tristan died defending the queen's old chambers. Sir Elyon was cut down in the stables. By the time Arthur reached the hall, half the round table lay bleeding. Mordred stood atop the dais, Excalibur's stolen scabbard in his hands. I come not as a traitor, he said, but as heir. Let the world know it. The age of Arthur is dead. The age of Mordred begins. He vanished before Arthur could draw his blade, but the wound was done. Merlin's farewell the next morning. Arthur found Merlin in the tower staring east toward Avalon. I can no longer guide you, the wizard said. Why? Because I have seen the end and I am part of it. Arthur's voice cracked. You've never abandoned me. I will not abandon you now, but I must walk where no man can follow. There are doors only magic may enter. If we are to save anything of this dream, someone must close them. Arthur tried to speak. Merlin placed a hand over his heart. When you face him, do not strike in hate, or all is lost. Then he turned and vanished in a shiver of starlight and wind. The fall begins at evening. Arthur climbed to the highest tower and looked out over Camelot. The sky was pale with smoke. The people whispered. The gates no longer felt secure. What had once been a dream of light now stood on the edge of war. Summon the banners. Arthur said to Sir Bedivere, we marched to Camelot. Chapter 10, The Grail Quest. A kingdom in decline. Camelot staggered, though Arthur stood. Crown unshaken, the cracks beneath him spread. The land itself seemed to suffer, crops failed. Rivers dried, the skies turned gray. The people whispered of a curse, of sins unpaid. And the knights who once stood as legends were fewer now. Many lay in graves. Others followed Mordred, whose rebellion now burned in every corner of the realm. Arthur turned inward, silent. Then, the fire behind his eyes burned low. But then came a vision. The dream of persevering Sir Percival, barely a man, awoke one dawn. With tears streaming down his face, I saw it, he said. A cup, a light so bright I could not bear it. Voice that said, he who finds the grail shall heal the land and the king alike. Some scoffed. But Arthur listened. Then go, he said, and let others follow who believe. From across the realm, those with faith gathered. The chosen knight Sir Galahad, son of Lancelot, pure of heart, raised in a monastery. Some whispered he had no sin. Sir Bors, a loyal and stern warrior, brave but haunted. Sir Percival, the dreamer, untested, yet touched by something holy. Sir Gawain, who sought redemption for blood once shed in anger. Arthur gave them his blessing. If you return with the grail, you may yet save us all. And so, the last great quest began. Into the unknown, for knights rode into lands untouched by map or memory. Forests where time bent, rivers that flowed upward, mountains that whispered. They faced trials not of blade, but of soul. Galahad resisted the temptation of eternal glory, refusing a crown offered by spirits of flame. Bors turned away from a vision of his dead brother, choosing duty over grief. Percival walked 7 days through a maze of mirrors, seeing every mistake he'd ever made, and still emerged smiling. Gawain fell. He struck down a priest disguised as a bandit, believing it a test. Grail denied him. After that, the Grail revealed at the foot of a silver mountain. Galahad entered a ruined chapel. There, beneath a beam of perfect light, the Holy Grail sat atop an altar of bone and crystal. He wept Dot, and as he touched it, his body dissolved into light, ascending beyond this world. He would never return. The return of the other Sir Bors and Sir Percival came back to Camelot with only a story, and a single drop of holy water in a sealed vial. They gave it to Arthur. He drank it in silence. No miracle followed. But that night, he slept peacefully for the first time in years. And in the morning, he stood taller. Grail was not meant to save me, he said. It was meant to remind me what is worth dying for. The final blow from the east. Scouts returned bearing grim tidings. Martyred marches, 40,000 strong, allied with Saxon warbands and traitorous knights. He bears a crown of twisted iron, and he has declared himself king of all Albion, son of Arthur, ender of Camelot. Arthur turned to his remaining knights. Prepare your arms, he said. We ride to Camlan. Chapter 11. The last battle. The ride to Camlan. The wind howled across the hills of Camlan, the valley where no city stood, only bone-white stone and withered grass. Arthur rode in silence, Excalibur strapped to his side, the last of his knights behind him. Sir Bedivere, old and grim. Sir Bors, wounded but loyal. Sir Percival, still dreaming of peace. Sir Lucan, coughing blood behind his breastplate. No more than 30 remained. Across the field, Mordred's army waited rows upon rows of ironclad traders and Saxon spears. At their center sat Mordred upon a black horse, his twisted crown glinting red in the dying light. Partly before the storm, Arthur rode to the center of the field with Bedivere and a white flag. Mordred met him alone. The silence between father and son stretched heavily. You wear a crown you did not earn, Arthur said. Mordred smiled. You are one you did not ask for. That makes us alike. Arthur's eyes narrowed. I built Camelot for justice. You built it on blood and secrets, Mordred replied, and now you will see it burn. Arthur's hand twitched near Excalibur's hilt, but he held still. Mordred turned. Tomorrow, you die. The night before the night, Arthur sat in his tent, oil lamps flickering. The wind outside whistled like a dirge. He called for Bedivere. If I fall, he said, do not let Excalibur fall with me. Then who shall wield it? The knight asked. No one, Arthur replied. It belongs to the world that made it. Outside, the men sharpened blades and whispered prayers. Some wept, none slept on, and on the other side of the field, Mordred laughed and drank as drums beat through the night. The battle of Camlan at dawn, the horns blew. The two armies met in the mist with the sound of thunder and steel. The ground turned red in minutes. Horses screamed, arrows blackened the sky. The songs of Camelot were drowned in death. Sir Lucan fell beside a banner of gold. Sir Bors was run through by 3 Saxon spears and died standing. Sir Percival carried the wounded for hours until a blade struck him in the back. By mid-afternoon, only a handful of knights stood with Arthur, and then Mordred came walking alone, blood spattered and smiling. Arthur versus Mordred they met at the center of the field, surrounded by smoke and flame, father and son. King and usurper, you could have ruled beside me, Mordred said. I would rather die with honor. Arthur answered. They clashed. Steel rang. Excalibur met a blade of blackened iron. Both men bled. Both men staggered. But in the final blow, Arthur drove Excalibur through Mordred's heart. Mordred smiled even as he fell. So, it ends, he whispered. Then he was gone, but Arthur was mortally wounded. The dying King Sir Bedivere found him bleeding beside a stone altar. My king, he said, what must I do? Arthur removed Excalibur and pressed it into his hands. Take it to the lake, he said. Throw it in, tell me what you see. Bedivere ran to the lake and stood on the shore. But when he looked at the sword, he hesitated. How could he throw away the sword of kings? He returned and lied. I saw only ripples. Arthur frowned, then go again, the second time. Bedivere still could not let it go. Arthur, fading fast, looked up with anger and sorrow. You would fail me now. Ashamed, Bedivere ran a third time. This time, he cast Excalibur into the water, and from the depths, woman's hand rose pale and glowing, caught the sword, and drew it beneath the waves. Bedivere returned and told Arthur what he saw. The king smiled faintly. Ever alone as the sun began to fall, a barge of silver and gold appeared upon the lake. its sails of silk, its deck lined with veiled women, the ladies of Avalon. They took Arthur in their arms. "Will I die?" he whispered. "Not yet," one said. "You shall rest, and one day you shall return." And so the king passed into legend.